I'll never forget the sound. It wasn't the wind, and it wasn't any animal I'd ever heard. It was a slow, rhythmic, tearing sound, like someone methodically ripping thick cloth over and over again, coming from the cornfield that bordered our property. I was 22 that summer, staying with my Grandpa Elias in his old clapboard house nestled deep in a holler in eastern Kentucky. The house had been in our family for generations, and the land was its own entity, ancient, quiet, and deeply watchful. Grandpa was a man of few words, most of them warnings. He'd point to the dense woods and say, "Don't you go wandering there after dark, boy," or he'd gesture to the sprawling cornfield that was his pride and his penance. "The corn feeds us," he told me once, his voice gravelly and low, "but it watches us too, and sometimes other things watch it with us." I dismissed it as the ramblings of an old man who'd spent too many solitary years with the mountains. But that first night I heard the sound. A cold dread settled in my stomach that told me he wasn't just telling stories. It was around 1 a.m. I'd been reading in my room, the window open to the humid night air. The sound started so softly I almost missed it. Pause. It was coming from the heart of the cornfield, a good 100 yards from the house. Curiosity, that fatal human flaw, got the better of me. I crept downstairs, careful not to wake Grandpa, and slipped out the back door. The moon was a thin, sharp sliver in the sky, offering little light. I grabbed the heavy-duty flashlight from the porch and clicked it on, its beam cutting a shaky path through the oppressive darkness. I stood at the edge of the field, the cornstalks standing well above my head, forming a wall of whispering green. The sound was clearer out here. Pause. Hello? I called out, my voice swallowed by the night. The sound stopped instantly. The silence that followed was heavier, more menacing than the noise had been. I swept the flashlight beam across the edge of the field. Nothing. Just the endless rows of corn, their leaves looking like skeletal hands in the dim light. I stood there for a full 5 minutes, my heart hammering against my ribs, but the sound didn't return. I went back to bed, chalking it up to a deer or a particularly destructive raccoon. The next night, it happened again. Same time, same rhythmic, tearing sound. This time, I didn't call out. I just listened from my window, a knot of fear tightening in my chest. The following morning, I went out to inspect the field. At first, everything looked normal, but as I ventured deeper, following the path I thought the sound had come from, I found it. A single row, about 20 yards in, had been completely harvested, but not by any human hand, and not by any animal. The stalks were torn from the ground, not cut. The ears of corn were gone, ripped from their husks, but the husks themselves were left scattered on the ground, shredded and wet, as if something had violently sucked the corn out. There were no footprints, no tire tracks, just this small, brutalized patch of earth. That evening, I finally worked up the nerve to tell Grandpa. I described the sound and showed him the damage. His face, usually a road map of gentle wrinkles, went pale and hard. He didn't look surprised. He looked resigned. "You've seen it then," he said, his voice barely a whisper. He stared out the kitchen window towards the field, or heard it rather. "The harvester." "The harvester? What is it, some kind of bear?" He shook his head slowly. "Ain't no bear. Ain't no animal you can shoot. It's a shadow. A thing that's been on this land longer than we have. My pappy told me about it, and his pappy before him. It comes when the moon is thin, and it takes its share. It doesn't take much. Just a row or two. A tithe." "A tithe? For what?" "For leaving the rest of it alone. For leaving us alone." He fixed me with a stern, fearful look. "You leave it be. You hear me? You see it. You look away. You hear it. You close your window and pray for sunrise. We don't acknowledge it. We just let it take its share." That night, the sound returned, but now, armed with my grandfather's warning, the fear was a physical thing, a cold stone in my gut. I tried to close my window, to bury my head under the pillow, but I couldn't. I had to see. I had to know. I crept to the window and looked out. The sliver of moon cast just enough light to see the silhouette of the cornfield, and there, moving between the rows, was a shape. It was tall, impossibly so, maybe 8 or 9 feet high, and thin as a rail. It was the blackest black I have ever seen, a void that absorbed the faint moonlight. It wasn't a man. Its movements were all wrong, a series of jerky, unnatural angles. Its long, spindly arms ended in what looked like scythes, and with a fluid, brutal motion, it would sweep an arm through a stalk. It would then bring its arm arm to a part of its body that might have been a head, and I'd hear a wet, crunching sound. It was harvesting. It was eating. I stood frozen, my breath caught in my throat. I was witnessing something old and wrong, something that defied the world I knew. I must have made a sound, a gasp, or my silhouette moved in the window, because the thing stopped. It froze mid-motion, one bladed arm raised. Then, slowly, impossibly, it turned its head. It had no face, no eyes, no mouth, just a smooth, featureless plane of absolute darkness. But I knew, with a certainty that turned my blood to ice, that it was looking directly at me. It dropped the stalk it was holding. It didn't run or charge. It simply glided. It moved towards the house with a silent, horrifying speed, flowing over the ground like oil. I stumbled back from the window, my legs giving way. I scrambled into the hallway, my mind screaming. I could hear nothing from outside. No footsteps, no tearing corn, just a profound, waiting silence. I spent the rest of the night huddled on the floor of Grandpa's room, both of us awake, listening. Nothing happened. No knock on the door, no face at the window. The first rays of dawn finally pierced the darkness, and the world outside seemed normal again. We went out together at first light. The cornfield stood silent, but there, in the soft dirt directly beneath my bedroom window, was a single, perfectly placed ear of corn. It was fresh, its kernels plump and yellow. It was a gift, or a warning, a reminder that the tithe had been paid and that I was now part of the agreement. I never saw the shadow again, and I left that holler as soon as summer ended. But sometimes, on a quiet night, when the moon is just a sliver, I'll hear a rustling outside my city apartment, and I'll remember the sound of tearing corn, and the feeling of that faceless gaze upon me. We paid our share, but I can't shake the feeling that one day it might come to collect a little more.